My current experience, I wouldn't say it's the best. I feel kind of left out.
I would say my current experience right now is I feel like there's a lot of underrepresentation here for people of color.
But over here, it's kind of hard to relate to people when they don't share the same background. In student council, we were selling homecoming tickets and we were speaking Spanish. And then this guy, he tells like a teacher, I couldn't understand them. So I was all like bundled up and I felt excluded. But we didn't mean to make him feel excluded. We were just speaking our language, you know? It's like we're just speaking Spanish. It's not our fault. Like you don't understand it, you know.
And we're walking out to like put all the decorations up, and all of a sudden she like walks up to me in the group and she's like, "There's no need to be aggressive." And I was like, "Huh?" She was like, "I said I wanted it that way. You didn't have to yell at her and be aggressive." And I was like, "But I wasn't." She was like, "But does it even matter?" She was like, I didn't. She's like, "I don't need you to talk back to me. Like, this is how I wanted it and this is why." And I was like, okay. And like that was like the moment where I was like, whoa, like that aggressive black like female stereotype is real. And even though like people push on me all the time, like you're not black, you're not black, you're not black, I'm still seen that way. So it's like so difficult because people are like, oh, you're not black, but it's like I'm black enough to experience racism, but not black enough to say that I'm black. Like it's such a fine line, and like kind of wraps it all back up to that identity question of like, what's your identity? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like I can't just give you an answer. Like I gotta think about it. Either that or I gotta tell you my whole family tree to get an answer, because like there's not really just one label.
I feel like a lot of things go on throughout the school day. I can name numerous like instances where I've just heard things near me, or like I've heard people say, and I can like see the table next to me during lunch and they can be saying something that's just totally like out of line. Or during PE, it happens every day and it's the same people that I always hear just saying like rude things that discriminate against certain groups of people.
There's a lot of unintentional like racism, and to be honest, I don't know like how to solve that, but there's like many ways. Like first educating yourself, like there's things you shouldn't ask or shouldn't say, like filter yourself, you know. So I feel like if we spread like awareness on like every diverse like culture, then people would understand more and stop making those comments that are really like uncomfortable. I feel like the students feel ignored, especially me. Like I feel like I'm not cared for as a student at Harlem, and it kind of makes me feel like as if like, oh, do I belong here? Like, do they think I belong here?
An organization that's called Teach Plus. They just do research on how school climates function across the state of Illinois. And they found that in 2020, there were 1.6 million examples of targeted racial hate speech, but it was Black students that year that experienced the majority of it, right? So again, the climate, if we're thinking about disparities in experience, oftentimes we don't all experience school the same way. Black students seem to have more challenges in school that are really important for people to consider. Beyond that, one other thing for this question is known as a discipline gap, or the racial discipline gap, if you want to get into it as another research term. But we know that across schools in the United States, Black students experience 3 times more likelihood to be suspended or expelled. They're more harshly punished for the same behaviors as their white peers. And these practices contribute to what's known as the school to prison pipeline. So like when a student, if you think about any class, if a student misses class, what happens to their ability to do well in the class? It shrinks. And when it shrinks, they're less likely to build skill and then graduate. And if you don't graduate, then it's a slippery slope or snowball effect to the potential risk of going to prison. And then last but not least, I think it's also just important to consider there's a lot of research out there about 20 to 30 years now that also says that sometimes African American students, if they're not in a very multicultural space, don't feel a sense of belonging. Black students report feeling being unseen, feeling unsupported, or being misunderstood by teachers and sometimes other students alike. So again, one of the important takeaways here is that relationships matter, but sometimes students don't have either opportunities or people aren't mindful of how they're trying to cultivate relationships with people who are different than them.
It was hard because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. Like going to a predominantly white school, like, you have to blend in. So you talk a certain way, you act a certain way. So when I got around my friends that were not in the Harlem district and community, they're like, why are you acting like that? Why are you talking like that? So it was just different. So like my identity as a teenager was just, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere.
When I came out to Harlem, definitely a culture shock coming out there, as it was predominantly Caucasian, and I wasn't used to that. It was very different when it comes to that aspect of it, just the type of the kids I was around, and then it was just a little bit behind where I was from in high school in Michigan, just as far as like dressing, talking, just like language. That's how people talk, that's how people dress.
It was a situation in class, in my English class, and we were reading Huckleberry Finn. And of course, I'm reading, she picked out, just random students in the class to read, but she called on my name. And in this particular part of the story, there was a racial derogatory word in there. And I had to speak out the dialogue and everything. And I skipped over the part where it was that racially charged word in there. And she stopped me and she said, no, read it. And in a room where there was only one other black kid, I felt horrible in that moment. What do you feel? What do you say in that moment? So of course I say it because you don't want to get in trouble or cause a scene. But I was in shambles when I got home. And I told my mom, how could she do this to me? And that started everything and got the ball rolling with my mom.
Coming from where I came from in Michigan and the school and the environment, I definitely didn't feel like I belonged out there. It was just a big setback for me. I probably going through a little depression just from being out there and not wanting to be out there and not knowing anybody out there and not really fitting in with the type of people that were out there. It's just a lot different. I wasn't accustomed to just how people were out there. I was used to city life and dealing with kids in the city, and then I came out to more of a country, I would say, type environment.
I wrote a paper in my history class, and it was about the Holocaust. But I related it back to minorities, here and today, and I mentioned in there the word African American. That's what I used there, about African American people and things. And when I got my rough draft back, he crossed out African American and put Negroes instead. And of course, it wasn't directed directly at me, but you feel that heat, when you, I'm like, what? I just did not understand. Why do I have to use this word? Why can't I use African American? He just blatantly said, no, this is what you're going to use. This is what you write in the paper. And that was the worst. That was another thing to add on top of everything. But in that moment, you just don't know what to do. Especially being a student and a kid, you're like, okay, how do I handle this?
I just responded out of a need to advocate for my daughters as a mother due to the behavior of some of the staff members. So mainly I felt like I needed to respond. I had to respond as a mom, as an advocate. One example was a teacher pressured my daughter to portray a character in a classroom project that they had. And she didn't choose that particular pioneer. She chose somebody else, but the teacher wanted her to portray a pioneer that she just did not want to, who was African American. And at that time, she was a young child, and she just didn't really understand. So I felt like she was pressured to do something that she didn't want to do. And that was when I began to give the district pushback about my children. But I also want to say that it was not only my children, it was other children as well too. And when parents found out that, you know, I was advocating for my children, they had questions as well, and they needed the support. Can you attend this meeting with me, Mrs. Bell, and what should I say to the teacher or you know, to the administrators, you know, just wanting me to support them as well too.
Jeremy faced a couple of different issues. One, a place where he didn't feel like he belonged. He didn't have it was kind of almost a repeat of me growing up back in the 70s, going to a Catholic school where you don't have any teachers to identify with. Your percentage is a little bit better, but you're still the minority at the school. You have to learn to get along, and the thing about it is he played a lot of sports, and sometimes he didn't get looked at because I don't want to say because of race, but I will say because of favoritism. And that kind of hurt his spirits, you know. That kind of made him feel less than. Students was there; they would talk behind your back. You know, they was making conversation, nitpicking. He would come home and say, and then he would say that the teachers, you know, they didn't want to, you know, listen to him, and that they had nobody to turn to, nobody to talk to, and that they felt like they was being picked on. It was very disappointing. You feel kind of helpless in the matter because here it is, your child is facing the same things that you had to face, and here it is. This was back in the 70s when I faced it, and now here it is in the 2000s, and we're still going through the same problems 50 years or 40-something years difference. It just doesn't add up. You would think that we would progress and not degress.
We started filing complaints with the United States Department of Education. They start getting a flood of complaints. So they just took notice. They took notice. They could not ignore them. And I think just trying to keep up with the complaints that the parents were sending as well too. They had to do something. So they ended up coming to our district as well too, meeting with the parents. And that was when our group formed, Concerned Minority Parents Advocacy Group. So we formed our group, and they met with us. They met with the parents. They met with the students. I started the process with Dr. DeLuca, and then I know that Julie Morris came on sometime later, and I don't remember when. And I want to give them their fair shake in saying that they answered every letter, every email that we sent, and we were bombarding them with a lot of things. So not just my family, but other families as well too.
Some of the issues, because I came in on the tail end of the lawsuit that was in arbitration already. And some of the issues was the mistreatment of African-American students, African-American students not being heard, their voices not being heard. They would go with complaints about other students mistreating them, and their cries out would go ignored. There was we had an African-American vice principal, and we might have had a teacher, but we didn't have many people that the African Americans could go to. So that kind of sparked the lawsuit, and it didn't seem like they was in a rush to add more teachers to of other ethnic that would support or help the minorities.
The agreements of the arbitration back in 2009, there were a few. And off the top of my head, I haven't looked in it for a few years, but what we agreed that we would changed some practices in our policy as far as how people could, parents could dispute like a disciplinary action. That was one of the things. They wanted to be able to have access to a process so that parents didn't feel like they were given the runaround as far as who they needed to talk to, and how the process would follow through. So that was one of the things that we talked about. We agreed on. We also agreed on developing a professional development to be able to understand and to learn about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how our students show up, whether that be the same or differently than our staff, so that our staff could be able to be well versed in being able to create a culture and a climate that was belonging, that established belonging, and respect for all of the students that they served. We had parents in our Concerned Minority Parent Advocacy Group who were parents of students with special needs, and parents of students who were African American, and parents of students who were Hispanic, Latinx population. Those were the two big parts of it. I also agreed that I would meet with the lead of that team person to stay up to date as to what was happening in the district, and we would meet monthly. And so we did that for 2 years, about 2 years, maybe just shy of 2 years, to really just stay in touch and to make sure that we would continue to move along the process. Those were the main things from the main agreements that we had within the arbitration agreement. But honestly, we were struggling as a district to meet the needs of all of our students, and so that was one of the really important things that came out of our arbitration agreement, was to really focus on how are we teaching and including all of our students with the highest expectations possible for all.
Now when I look back, I'm just like overwhelmed with the love that she had for me at the time, because it's not easy, especially when she's, the minority in the community also, and she had to go in front of this board of all white, all Caucasian, leaders and talk to them about what her child was going through and advocate for not only her child, but other parents and students. Like, I think about that and I'm just like, she had to have so much strength to go through that. And then on top of that, working full time and dealing with her own kids at home. Like, I don't know how she did it, but it also makes me stronger as a mom to say, okay, I can do it. If my mom could do it, I can do it, So I'm very grateful for everything. And I love that she had, because a lot of kids, like looking back on it, my friends and stuff, a lot of kids don't have that. They don't have that at home where their parent just, says, okay, and they get up and fight and don't ask questions. They just do it, and she's like that. But she's not even just like that with me. She's like that with everyone. So I'm really grateful for that and proud of that, to say that about my mom.
Just recently at one of our board meetings, we did a presentation, or one of our schools did a presentation on biases, and then I ended up, having a conversation with the board as well, in attendance, about the importance of our teachers recognizing the impact that biases have on both their teaching, or it could have on both their teaching, and then too, with working with kids. And so now we've incorporated that in our training district-wide. Our schools, they do that, with teachers to start before the school year starts, have bias training. So it's a part of our PD plans. And so again, it's really important, I think, to not only have things in place, but to make it a part of your culture, and it's become a part of our culture. And those are embedded now into our Institute days and our school improvement days, where we have specific times where teachers are talking about biases, talking about our equity work at different levels, within our schools, and it's great to see. I've seen them myself, and so yeah, it's embedded, into that, and that's where our long range plan comes into play is really being specific and making sure that our students, all of our students, but particularly our marginalized students, know that they're supported, know that there's systems in place for them and built for them. I'm really proud of our OLA program, for our Spanish-speaking students who wants to participate in that. I'm proud of our fine arts program. I'm proud of our advanced learner program as well, again, which is giving our kids an opportunity to be a part of those programs, but also too, for me, a big goal is supporting our staff in what they need. And I've said this before, but I'll reiterate, having equity teams at each building, and our equity teams able to, so for example, at the high school, really look at what challenges, our students and staff are facing when it comes to equitable outcomes, and then putting plans together and really getting to the root of their schools and working through that. And then at the district level, us supporting, our buildings and what PD they need to accomplish their goals. And so those things are working, in my opinion. Our equity teams are thriving. We're able to provide PD when necessary to our equity teams as well, but still continuing to be intentional with that.
The biggest challenges, in my opinion, is what I call like a representation gap. Sometimes research calls it a cultural mismatch or a demographic divide, but we know that a majority of the teacher workforce is white by about 80%, which can lead to differences in expectations between ethnic groups, communication styles, and even connection. A lack of persistent, meaningful, diverse representation in books continues to adversely affect the way that students learn in schools. And so there's some research from a group called Educational Trust, and they were looking at just curriculum in 2023. And they found that a lot of different minority groups are not really fairly represented in school. And without that representation, it affects things like identity development in students. We know that even well-meaning teachers, so there are some teachers that can do a great job of building relationships across racial differences. They can build solidarity. They can make you feel seen, heard, and valued. But sometimes the texts that they choose portray Black trauma without counterbalancing joy, resilience, or brilliance. Sometimes they don't choose texts that really put people of color in the driver's seat. And that has a lot of negative impacts, because when our peers don't see us in empowered roles, that also impacts the way that they treat us, right? It also impacts the way that they think about us too. And so sometimes people tend to misunderstand Black students as a result of just the way that they've been socialized. Often in general, though, we know that we lacked mirrors in our curriculum. And without those mirrors, right, of our excellence and joy, sometimes that affects our confidence and our sense of belonging in school.
But I remember walking down these hallways. But it's funny because when I walk in, all of the emotions that I had in these hallways, it comes back with me. And as I feel that, it's not a, I didn't belong here. It's not a, this wasn't for me. It's a, this is where it all started. This is my foundation. This is how I became who I am and who I wanted to be. And at the time, I didn't realize that that's what was going on. There were a lot of days where I did leave school crying. There were a lot of days where I left school super excited. There were a lot of days I left school just not understanding things. And all of those emotions contributed to who, you get the jokes about your lips. Oh my goodness. Now that at Harlem was terrible. The jokes about your lips, the jokes about your features, your Black features. And it wasn't just from white people. It was from Black boys too. It was just so much going on in these little bit of pockets where I look back now, and there were those racial discriminarities. Those racial differences, and stereotypes and all these different things that at the time I didn't even realize that's what they were, because I guess that's not what my mind was focused on as a teenager. It was truly focused on having fun and living my life with my friends because I was awarded that opportunity. But now that I look back, it was okay, there were some things embedded and sprinkled where it was okay, that's a little bit deeper than what you understand.
I guess I could say I've been asked a lot of questions that is kind of stereotyping. They're kind of understanding the stereotype, asking me if this is real, how's it work, or how's it affect me, or like how's it apply to me. Like if you don't fit a stereotype or anything like that, they'll kind of ask you why you don't fit that stereotype, or why other people do this. You're kind of like the spokesperson. So it might come off aggressive how they ask, because some people don't know how to ask it correctly.
The one thing that always bothered me as far as a microaggression or stereotype was about how I would talk. It was always, you talk so white. And I didn't understand that. Like, we speak the same language, just because I use proper grammar, that doesn't say anything about me, nor should people who don't use proper grammar. Like, it shouldn't say anything about them either. So that was definitely the biggest one that kind of, when people would say it, would irk me a little bit.
It was only easy to talk to other students of color or Black students because they knew what I was going through. And I think teachers, some of them it was easy to talk about, especially like Mr. Harris and Mr. Yarbough, because they're Black and they've had some of those like similar experiences too. But especially when it came to like my friends, I feel like a lot of them just didn't really understand where I was coming from because they never had experienced microaggressions before. So every time I would like bring it up, they kind of would just like brush it off and be like, oh, well, I didn't mean to, so it's fine, even though it really wasn't.
I was one of 2 Black students in the classroom, and the first day of school, well, not the first day for me, because I transferred in later, I was paired with the only Black student in the classroom by a female teacher. She was a teacher who was of minority descent as well. She wasn't Black, but she was I think she was Korean. And it was a moment where she introduced me in front of the class, and the first thing that she said is, you can sit by Jalen. Jalen is actually the name of one of my best friends. We've been friends for the last 15 years, who happened to only be the only Black student in that classroom. Our friendship was kind of forced because we were in survival mode in the classroom. You know, Black History Month, things go on, questions come up. You're the only Black student, people turn to you. You know, your hair looks different, questions of what you're wearing. And you kind of learn to connect with one another with the similarities, but with the differences that everyone else sees in you. So that was probably the first example, because I was being forced to become friends with someone that I didn't choose to, at least not initially.
I feel like every classroom or like every setting you have to adjust, because like for high school, how we do like the passing period, like you'll go to your class and say you're like in a room full of all white kids, so you're gonna act accordingly. It's how you think that room will react to you. For certain groups of kids, like they might be entertained by you, like entertained by your difference and your personality, so you kind of feed into that. Some you just want to be laid back, chill. That's not your crowd. They're not entertained by you, I guess you could say.
It prepared me. And now that I think about it, especially being a mother, I'm in the debate of, am I gonna send my son to Harlem? And having that conversation, because a lot has changed, a lot has gotten better.
It's essentially this idea that rather than focusing on like big systems, we can focus on our community. So like, what do parents have to say about the experience? What do students have to say about the experience? And starting with stories of the experiences of the people experiencing the system should actually help promote growth, right? So I guess what I advocate for is kind of like it's known as a data-driven approach, but it's hard for people to argue against data within your own community when you have it. So when I say how young people can really contribute toward equity work, I think they can be a part of the effort to run interviews, focus groups, distribute surveys, collect data, and then use that data to advocate for change within their own school district. So like, hey, we just talked to 20 students. We just signed a petition. We talked to maybe 40 or 50 parents. And these are the things that they say about this space. And then after you collect that, then you can start working towards adjustments and improvements, right? Now that we have all this data, now that we've heard a majority of people ask for this or say this is an issue, now what do we do to address it? So we can turn our data into action. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways I can give you. We can create solutions when we listen to people who are experiencing our systems.
So when I first got here, there wasn't a lot of like students of color, especially like black students, but now that I'm a senior, I feel like there is a lot more diversity here. However, there's still racism despite the school being way more diverse.
I feel uncomfortable every time I enter the front door. It's just like, oh, I'm nothing like these kids. I'm way different. And sometimes I get overwhelmed or I exaggerate. And it's just like, I be so tired of the name calling. I be tired of a lot of things I can't even name.
I feel like there isn't much representation, and I just don't think that this is, I don't know, I just think that this is a very white school with a very white culture, I guess, like, and that's very evident when you go to homecoming. Like, they don't play any music that we enjoy, and you know, it's just like, I want to say boring, and it's just not really inclusive.
People just judge everything you do. Oh, is it because you're black? You do that sport because you're black. You like this type of food because you're black. It just don't feel comfortable and it don't sit right in my head.
Teachers and like staff not really caring about like our issues going on at the school. Like, I would report racism and nothing would be done about it. So I just feel like it's too normalized here. Like, it's not seen as like a really huge issue. Like, I remember being called the N-word in class and the teacher didn't even say anything about it. So I don't know, it's like there's not enough discipline when it comes to racism.
That the teachers think that the people of color don't care about their grades, what they're doing in school, if they're doing their work or not. And I feel like they get really surprised when I turn in stuff on time, when I'm good with my grades, when I do my work when I'm supposed to.
Definitely having more black staff here and just making things more inclusive and addressing the racism that black students do experience on a daily basis, because whenever like you go out in the hallway, you always hear like, you know, just very ignorant things being said. And I'm just like, there's a teacher right there and you're not gonna say anything about that. So it kind of just like gives like, you're okay with that behavior.
I feel like since the teachers aren't representing it, the kids can't really go to the teachers like they want to, because most of them are not people of color, and there's more diversity coming in our school. So most of the kids just keep stuff to themselves during like school and during the years they go through school.
Going back to what I said about teachers not holding certain actions accountable, I think if we did have more Black teachers here, things like some things they wouldn't let slide, you know, and then that's gonna make a huge difference in the school overall.
I mean, it's overwhelming because you can't talk to that teacher that we have currently about your situations or what you're really going through, because sometimes they really don't get it like they say they do, but yeah, they don't get it.
And so just really getting the word out, that Harlem even exists. And so what I've been doing is being intentional with joining the YMCA board, the Boy Scouts of America board, Discovery Center board, and making sure that there's a presence, that Harlem has a presence, in the community and businesses. And so people know about Harlem and that our kids can take advantage of the resources that they have. So that was step one. Another step that we've done is make sure that our interview questions are questions, that are equitable. And ensuring that we're asking questions to really make sure that we're getting teachers whose mindset is about equity work and improving on equity work. And so we did that. And now our current assistant superintendent of human resources has made it, her mission to really go to HBCUs, different colleges to recruit and to make sure that potential candidates know where Harlem School District 122 is located and that we're hiring and that we would love for them to join our staff.
My family and I relocated to a whole different region, and just getting back here and hearing some of the things, I feel like, I don't know if somebody dropped the ball or they're tired, or I believe it was a long-range arbitrary plan of maybe 6 or 7 years, so maybe after the 6 or 7 years, nobody really did anything. But I just feel like it's going to require parents and students really fighting for change. Even though it may not look like things are happening, they just cannot quit. I feel that they should pick up the long-range plan that they laid out in the beginning. So if it is ended, I feel that they should just resurrect what was going on back then, so that they can partake in a newness, I should say, or a continuation, like nothing has changed. And for me, I would say that that's an embarrassment. If we spent all this time, years, and coming to the table to plan out all of this and nothing has changed, that's an embarrassment, not only for the district, but for the community, that people don't want change. So I feel that it should be opened up again, if there are issues. And I can't imagine that there are not any issues, given where we live. Needless to say, parents, teachers, and students, and even the community have so much power. They have so much power, and I think oftentimes they don't realize it. They don't realize how much power they have. But it just means if the teacher is not understanding, I feel that for a child to learn, the teacher must be understanding and they must be caring. And if you don't have those two things at all, how far can you get? How far can you get with accepting how a student is? So with that being said, I just feel like you can pick it up again. Start asking questions. Start rallying the other parents. Hey, are you having this difficulty doing this? Has your child complained about this? And I'm sure you'll find the same or similar stories. And then you start asking questions. This voluntary resolution agreement needs to be revisited because it sounds like there's issues and it cannot be swept under the rug because it's just going to continue. And I also feel that no child should have to come to school and on a random day feel like they do not belong.
I think we as institutions have a deep responsibility to be responsive to the students that we serve. I think we need to create more feedback mechanisms to hear our most vulnerable and underserved populations. And I think institutions also need to own our data. We need to take responsibility for the inequities that we create. Instead of blaming students, we should always be in the process of coming up with solutions to address issues year by year. And I think we can do that through conducting audits, right? We can analyze our hiring practices. I know you're about to ask me a question later on about disparities, right, or differences in racial demographics in teachers. We can take a look at our hiring practices and make adjustments there. We can take a look at our discipline data and make adjustments there. We can take a look at our curriculum for whether we have fair representation or not and make adjustments there too, right? So there are all sorts of different vantage points. And I think when systems do take responsibility, when they create roles or allow for student organizations or even faculty organizations to take action, we're moving in the right direction. Like when we give people an opportunity to speak, it promotes healing and belonging. And when we share those stories with institutions, it creates accountability. We move towards change when we make time to listen to stories.
The future goal is really to make sure that we're filling the needs of our students. And the only way I think that we can do that is to have meetings where our students are coming and feel comfortable in sharing what's going on. And so I think that's a goal that we need to put at the forefront and we need to do. I know for me personally, meeting with students, and not just our Black and Brown students, but all students, and meeting with them, and because we have advocates throughout our buildings that believe in our equity work, both students and staff, and just making sure that we're creating a platform where their voices can be heard. When things are happening and having those conversations with our parents and our students, and making sure that they feel heard. I think for me personally, this is an area where we need to improve on, is really like having those spaces where parents can actually come in and us having conversations and hearing their voices, because usually I don't hear things until there's a problem. And I want to be more proactive than reactive with that. And so part of my goals or my future goals is to have those spaces, maybe have some coffee with the superintendent, and we're having conversations and bringing individuals in, because not since 2009, when we had the Concerned Minority Parent Group that came about and wanted to have conversations about the way that Black and Brown students were being treated in Harlem. I don't think we've really had an in-depth conversation like that since. It's been more of the work that we've been doing as a district, and so maybe now following up on that and seeing where we are and how our community views the work that we've been doing, particularly with our equity work. I mean, just on the side of the high school, something that came out of that is our banner that we have at all of our schools, and I think that's great, and our community has, in my opinion and what I've seen, really accepted that. But I think it's a good idea to revisit and see and bring families in to have that conversation. And so what I would invite families to do, if they would happen to even see this documentary, is we have an equity and social justice committee that meets once a month, and they're invited to those meetings as well, where we talk about our equity work and things like that. And so we can get that information out as well.